This is War Stories, a cybersecurity podcast where we extract the best stories from the field of penetration testing. Your host is Zac Davis, experienced cyber and physical security tester. War Stories is brought to you by Cyber Coffee, engineered and roasted to keep you hacking the planet all day and night. Give it a try at drinkcybercoffee.com and use promo code WAR10 to save 10%. Enjoy the show.
Cool. Well, welcome to another episode of War Stories, the podcast powered by Cyber Coffee. SEVNX.com if you haven't tried it yet. It's delicious. Today, we've got a very special guest, Mike Sviben. You are my mentor, and most of the other people who have been on this podcast, we've talked a lot about Protiviti. You pretty much taught all of us, so I'm really excited to have you here today.
Great to be here.
You had a big impact. I think my reporting, my red team skills, a lot of that stuff came from you. So I'm really excited to talk to you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So you know the format. Tell us who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Michael Sviben. When I first got started, I actually went to community college, right, in Camden, at Blackwood in Camden County. And from there, I initially got my first IT job at work in the state of New Jersey. Right, so it was in the maritime industry.
I forgot about that. Down at the waterfront.
Down at the waterfront. Yeah. Learned a lot, right? And eventually, I needed to kind of move on. So I got still in technology operations for about 5 years, right? So one company went to the next, and then was at Drexel University getting my cybersecurity degree. So I was doing that full time, working full time, and then eventually I got my first break, right? Deploying content inspection filters, DLP, web, email proxies. So it was actually fun, and that's kind of was my first step into the security realm, right?
Working with some of those tools and
yeah, exactly. So rip and replace models, right? Deploying, ripping out Barracudas and installing the company that I was working for their own cybersecurity products. And then eventually after I graduated from Drexel, I got an opportunity to work at a company called Protiviti. And that's when, you kind of, do the grunt work. You work your way up into consulting, and you're doing pen testing and database security assessments and security architecture reviews, firewall reviews. But the more and more I got into the pen testing, I fell in love with it, right? It was kind of like a passion of mine. So, stayed at Protiviti for close to 8 years, right? That's where I met all of you guys.
So we've talked a lot about the lab, the windowless room. I think quite a few of us have talked about kind of the bond when we were all there and what it was like working at that place. Well, you were in charge of that lab and the craziness. You were running it for quite a few years there.
Yeah, I think I started running it in 2014, right up into 2018. But I will say that, there was other people in the lab that I learned from as well, right? So there was, predecessors, John Beck. Hopefully he can kind of get on here.
We're hoping to have John and Dave at some point.
But there was a lot of other people in the lab too that I learned from, right? And I kind of took what they taught me and then kind of just went on, right? And kind of just kept improving my skill set. I kind of cultivated my tradecraft, right? And had a concerted effort and kind of improving, right? Because there was a lot of talent in there. And you just wanted to be better, right? Everyone encouraged you. And I think that's what we did when we were in the lab together with everyone else is we encouraged everyone else to kind of, improve each other, right? Not just run tools and not know what those tools are doing.
Andrew talked about that on the last one. It's making sure you know what you're doing before you do it.
Exactly. And
understand how things work at a deeper level.
Exactly. And we had a lot of fun doing that. So there was new tools being built, right? And we built some of our own tools and we used them and we had a lot of fun with it. But, from there, what I'm doing now, I kind of started my own company with a business partner, Erkin, who you know as well.
We kind of well. We want to have Erkin on at some point.
Yeah, you got to have Erkin on here. Very talented individual, right?
So you guys got Domain Guard?
We got Domain Guard.
Guardyourdomain.com. Plug your stuff, Mike.
Exactly. That's fine. Hey, you could plug it for me.
I'll plug it for you.
No, but essentially we're an external threat visibility platform where we do domain monitoring, look for impersonations on domains. We do takedown services, We do some dark web monitoring for customers, impersonations of social media accounts. And then we do attack surface monitoring, right? So looking for various different endpoints that are on the internet, and we kind of probe them and find vulnerabilities, exploit them, send over the recommendations or remediations to our customers. They fix it, we retest it, and then we close out the issue, right? So it's kind of like that full package of external issues, right? And kind of being more proactive, right, with your organization. So we're having a lot of fun there and building, and it's a lot of work, but it's been very rewarding to this point.
Awesome, cool. Well, question number 2. So outside of Domain Guard and the platform you guys are building, what tool do you got for us today, or one of your favorite tools from your career?
Yeah. So I was waiting for this question, right? We're preparing for it, and I'm not a fan of any one particular tool, right? Or I'm a fan of a lot of tools, right? But it's not one that I typically use. I figure, with pen testing or red team operations, you pick the tool that you are, comfortable with, but also that meets the scenario that you're leveraging, right, or using. So I kind of want to, say that one of the tools is actually a tool that John Beck created. It was called MIAdmin, right? And it was written.
Forgot about MIAdmin.
It was written in C++, and it used or leveraged the Win API. But that tool was kind of, this is before the Bloodhound days, right? So with MIAdmin, that tool essentially allowed you to, once you get a foothold on the internal network, you essentially, plugged in, the set of user credentials that you compromised, and you start hunting for domain users that are part of local administrators group, right? And that tool was changing for us, right? Because we would go in and try to do stuff manually or use some other tool that wasn't working well.
That was probably even before PowerView, the Active Directory enumeration stuff. We talked about that with Andrew on the last one. Yeah. That was probably before that.
That's way before that. This is an executable that you install on the endpoint, and it's an exe, right? But it's a binary wouldn't get caught, right? And it worked really well. It's very similar to if you do NetRPC, right? And you kind of feed in the credentials from a Linux machine and kind of loop through domain users, right, or local groups. But the same concept, right? But that tool, since we didn't have a Linux machine and we needed something for Windows, that tool was perfect, right? Sure. And it really got to where we needed to get. It allowed us to discover those breadcrumbs that we needed to elevate access, right? And it made things a lot easier for us, right, during these internal engagements, or external to internal.
Sure. Yeah, very cool.
So it's not a famous tool, but it's a tool that someone that I learned from and that I respected, that shared it with us, that developed it, that allowed us to kind of enhance, right, and kind of leverage.
I think that's a good kind of point, because, I always joke, I don't consider myself an actual hacker because I'm not writing the tools. Yeah. You got to be able to write code and develop tools to be a real hacker. So I always kind of joke I'm a script kiddie, but I'm really good at being a script kiddie.
We all started as script kiddies.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but that's definitely a hacker tool written by a real hacker. The custom developed stuff. I mean, especially nowadays, you need that to be competitive. I mean, we have a custom built C2 framework that we use just because nothing else will execute. Yeah, got to do some of the custom stuff.
So I'm a firm believer in kind of building your own tools for the scenarios, right? And that's how you learn as well, right? And I think that's what, we learned from other people in the lab at the time. You can't just run these other tools that are out there, because there's going to be a time where it doesn't work and you have to build something else that's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with the detection. If you use something open source now, it's probably going to get picked up. Build your own.
You may have to modify certain signatures, right, or certain components, and kind of repackage it. But you definitely need to know what you're running, how it's working, and that's why I'm a firm believer in kind of building your own tools. I leverage other people's tools, or I'll build certain tools that I think are going to work for what I needed to do, and but that's part of the tradecraft, right? That's kind of what we do, and kind of challenging ourselves there.
Cool, awesome. So third question, and the big one, what kind of a story do you got for us today? I know you've got a lot. We were just talking about some of them.
We were talking about some of the ones out there, right? But so I guess I kind of want to talk about one of the engagements that I was on, where we were using a bot. Actually, we call it John's bot, right?
I remember John's bot.
Yeah.
It's Used it. I'll just say a chat protocol.
Pretty infamous, right?
Yeah.
It uses a chat protocol. Yeah, and it worked really well. But on a particular engagement, we're doing a phishing engagement, it didn't work, right? For whatever reason, whether the proxy settings, it didn't read the proxy settings and it couldn't call out to our infrastructure. But I had basically doing spear phishing campaign, that didn't work. So then I wanted to, see what else was out there, and I started reading about ICMP shells. So this is very interesting because ICMP shells.
Is this when I was at Purdue? I sort of remember this.
It probably was, right. And I didn't write the ICMP shell. It was actually a guy. It was back in 2010, and I think his name was Nico Liedecker, and he kind of wrote the ICMP shell.
So just for our less technical listeners, so the bot Mike was talking about, like a bot or a command and control C2, that's basically like a program you'll run on a victim computer that communicates up to the internet, allows you to send commands down. The one we would use a lot of times was built on this chat protocol. ICMP is actually ping. So if you've ever done anything with, troubleshooting a network in your house, or you're trying to ping Google, see if you can get to the internet, that actual request is an ICMP request. And I think with an ICMP shell, it's using that protocol and somehow padding data into a mess.
You're using that protocol, and you're basically the individual that crafted this shell. You're able to pass basically, the command shell, right, through ICMP protocol.
Somehow sending packaging up
different
the
data, and there's buffer
up.
Settings that you have to set, right, in order to kind of see, like, so when you initiate a command or you have that connection, you essentially, there's a buffer size, and the buffer could be small where you can't see the output, right? So there's certain settings in there, and it was all written in C, right? So I wrote C++, but I didn't know anything about C.
You're getting low when you get down to
C.
Yeah,
you're getting pretty low. But you can essentially set the target, right, which is your attacking machine. So I was messing with that in the lab and trying to figure out, okay, how is this shell going to work for what we needed to do? And setting the buffer size and setting the requests, right? You have to set those parameters in a way where you're going to have a nice interactive shell where you can kind of, so you're setting the buffer and you're setting the requests themselves so that you can essentially have something that's semi-interactive, right? Mm-hmm. But the one thing about ICMP is it's all clear text. So this is very risky, right? By having, your target, click on this and download the program, and now it's calling out. But every command that you're running is actually in the clear.
So you got to be really careful what you're using it for.
Yeah. So one of the part of the rules of engagement with my point of contact was get approval, right? Because I knew, the other program didn't work. This was an option that did work, but before I actually started executing commands, it was essentially had to get approval, right? Because I knew the sensitivity of like exchanging credentials or any other data over that protocol is going in the clear.
Yeah, it's going to be hitting all the infrastructure along the way in clear text.
Exactly. So. And so I didn't think it was going to work, right? Because, everything, I didn't know what their outbound firewall rules would allow. The bot wasn't working. This ICMP shell was the only thing that did work. So they were allowing the, ICMP packets or ping packets to go outbound, right? So the fact that it worked was amazing. The other thing is that this was the slowest shell ever, right?
Sending all that stuff up and pings and ping responses. Yeah,
but it worked, right?
Sure.
And the fact that it worked was amazing. And I thought, I got to eventually tell the story to someone, right? And this is the perfect time to tell it. But from there, allowed me to then, interact with that service, right? Once we got the fish, and then the other thing that I did was upload like certutil and then upload like plink, right? So plink is another tool that we would use for like reverse shells, right? So basically you would use plink to establish an SSH tunnel back outbound. So, we had to figure out what port was allowed going outbound first. So there was other tools that, uploaded. But once we found a port that was allowed other than ICMP, we leveraged plink, set our attacking server.
Funny, some of those things are kind of coming back.
Right?
I was doing a purple team, or it was sort of like a hybrid like IR exercise thing. But one of the things we were going to try and do is do C2 outbound
Yeah.
just to show like the network traffic.
Yeah.
The only thing that was allowed out was SSH, which is surprising. You think they would have blocked that, but yeah, P-Link.
P-Link, and then you create like a SOX proxy, right? Which is basically, reversing the shell back, and then you can essentially port whatever port. But now it's gone over encrypted. So now that we got another shell, right? It's getting encrypted.
Now you're a little safer.
Now we're a little safer.
So you were really using the ICMP shell as like what I would call like a stage 0.
Yeah.
It's like initial access, that's it. Then you're going to try and get your more stable connection to actually do the assessment.
Correct. Yeah. And then, I felt more comfortable with P-Link at that because now everything is, going over an encrypted channel.
Yeah.
But the ICMP shell was still there, right, to be used, right? Like just
so like almost persistent.
Yeah, it was pretty much persistent until they shut off the box, right? Which they never did, right? Or during the engagement at least. So we still had that connection for whatever purpose that we needed to, just in case we kind of lost connectivity with P-Link. But that essentially leveraging that and then getting access through this small shell initially, or the slowest shell, the story gets interesting because then we met with the customer, told them about the ICMP shell, and they said, well, we use Palo Alto and we have ICMP shell as a policy to block outbound. And so I'm working with the engineers on Palo Alto,
so
right?
They're trying to figure out like
they're trying to figure it out. So I had to keep on executing that payload, right? And they were kind of in real time trying to figure out what was going on. And he said, we can't figure out like how this is working.
How it's getting out.
Yeah, how it's getting out. And they recommended to the client, just block ICMP outbound. So don't use our policy essentially, right? And just block it outbound. Yeah. So that's what they end up doing. But I think, there's plenty of stories, but I think this one is interesting because ICMP, people don't realize that actually can be used to establish persistence.
Well, and that's the name of the game now is well, it's funny. Old techniques are coming back, and I know a lot of times finding these new third-party services.
Yeah.
Third-party C2 is kind of the new hotness, or at least something I've been hearing a lot about, where they're trying to find, you're not going to be able to just send web traffic out.
Yeah.
You need to find some trusted service to proxy your stuff through, or find a legacy service that people might not be thinking about.
Exactly.
I mean, when was the last time you heard about an ICMP shell? That's like
it's a long time, and that tool was built in 2010, right? And that was used 2015, 16, right?
Sure.
But who knows if it still could be used right now, right? In 2024.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Got to just find stuff that's old enough that the next gen AV isn't gonna be able to catch it.
Exactly.
Cool. All right, Mike. Well, thanks so much for being here. It was great to have you.
Yep, likewise.
Hear some of the old stories. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of War Stories. Mike, tell everybody once again, how can they find Domain Guard? Guardyourdomain.com.
Just go to guardyourdomain.com and, you pretty much see our website and reach out if you need any help.
Guys do. Yeah, domain monitoring, domain reputation, attack surface monitoring, dark web, they've got you.
Yep,
So
exactly.
Cool. Thanks again for being here. If you haven't tried Cyber Coffee, 7x.com.
Yeah,
Give it a try.
I had some. It's actually pretty good.
It's good stuff, isn't
Good stuff. Yeah. So I'm a
Very
fan.
good. Cool. All right, guys. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you for the next one.
All right. Cool. Thanks, man.
How'd you like that? That was a bit of better coffee sale than Jude's.